Only a tiny percent of you are subscribed with the bell on. And that means you're missing the scariest stories we drop. If you love chills down your spine, subscribe now and hit that bell. It truly helps keep this channel alive. When I was 20, my college friend Adam inherited a crumbling colonial house about 12 miles outside of Rockbridge County, Virginia. The house had been in his family since the late 1800s, and honestly it looked like it. Peeling red paint, crooked shutters, and a sagging wraparound porch that looked like it would collapse in the next storm. It had barely been updated, maybe a bathroom fix in the 70s, but otherwise it was like stepping into a forgotten past. Creaks came from everywhere, floorboards, old vents, the roof. It was never really quiet. I didn't mind though. I'd been helping Adam fix the place up over a few weekends. We did minor repairs, scrubbing, clearing brush, fixing cabinets. Tools were stored in the dirt-scented basement, which always gave me the creeps. One feature stood out in the living room, a large oil painting above the fireplace. It was of a boy on a hobby horse, painted with dull colors and unsettling detail. The boy wasn't smiling, just staring past you with this blank expression. The canvas was cracked and blistered, especially near his hand, where the paint seemed to be peeling into odd shapes. Adam said his great-aunt hated the painting and once tried to remove it, but a local historian claimed it was part of the home's heritage. Weird, but we laughed it off, at least until I visited alone one weekend. It was early March, and I arrived just before dusk. I brought food, a flashlight, and planned to replace a few bathroom fixtures. But something about the painting felt off that day. One paint bubble had formed a sharp edge. It almost looked like a knife. I took a picture, but it came out blurry. Adam dismissed it as normal aging paint. But after that, I couldn't stop noticing it. Each weekend I came back, the painting was slightly different. Bubbles showed up in new spots, always forming into strange outlines, like coils, nooses, or jagged shards. And every time they disappeared by the next visit, leaving faint stains. Eventually I started documenting it. I took dozens of pictures, even tried recording overnight. But nothing captured it right. My cousin Natalie, who did art conservation for a summer, said it could be due to moisture and heat. But she admitted the shapes were too specific to ignore. The weirdest part was the patterns. They looked like hands, twisted expressions, even silhouettes behind the boy. Adam began to think I was getting obsessed. I kind of was. I'd spend hours studying the surface of that painting. Then came the week Adam asked me to house sit. I said yes, hoping to finally get answers. The first night was quiet, but the second night, something snapped me awake. 4 loud slams from upstairs, one after another, like someone walking fast and slamming each door shut. I checked and found all the doors wide open. Adam's dog, Cody, was growling at the staircase. Later, Cody started whining at the dining room window. In the reflection, I briefly saw a face, but it was just shadows and tree branches, an illusion. Or at least that's what I told myself. I slept in the living room that night, eyes on the painting. Around 3 a.m., Cody growled again, this time at the painting itself. His fur stood up. The canvas looked warped in the dim light. The bubbles had grown into dark, distorted shapes. When I turned the lamp on, the warped parts looked like screaming faces and stretching limbs. The next morning, I called Adam and told him everything, about the sounds, the dog's behavior, the shapes. He paused and said, Cody's always hated that painting. My aunt used to say it changed when no one was watching. I told him we had to take it down. He agreed. That afternoon, we unscrewed the painting. It was heavier than expected, and when we finally lowered it, we saw what was behind it, a hole freshly cut into the plaster. About the size of a dinner plate, cold air drifted out. The opening led into a narrow wall cavity. We shined a flashlight inside, and something moved. We backed up and immediately called the police. They found signs of someone living in the basement crawl space. Sleeping bags, food cans, a torn flashlight, even a diary with scribbles. 2 hours later, officers pulled a thin man from the insulation inside the walls. He was dirty, quiet, and didn't resist. He'd been there for weeks, maybe longer, sneaking in through a broken cellar window, crawling through the wall cavities. At night, he would watch from behind the painting. His body heat and breath had caused the warped canvas and those shifting paint bubbles. The scariest part? He might have been living there for years, even before Adam's aunt passed. No ID, no explanation. Just a man hiding in the walls, changing our perception of what was real. Adam sealed the wall, threw out the painting, and replaced the window. I haven't returned. I still remember Cody's growl, the paint bubbles, and how we convinced ourselves it was just old house noises. Turns out, real horror isn't the ghost you imagine. It's the person you never noticed. Are you a horror lover, craving something real? For just $2, dive into over 30+ true and unique horror stories, each one different, each one unforgettable. Every story comes with a chilling visual in the background to pull you deeper into the terror. This isn't your average creepypasta. It's raw, suspenseful, and one of a kind. Get your ebook now, if you dare. The rain came down fast and heavy that Friday afternoon. By lunchtime, we were drenched despite our waterproof jackets and ponchos. No matter how we adjusted them, the narrow trail had already turned to mush. Tree roots we had skipped over easily the day before were now slick traps. I lost my footing twice, and Sam twisted his knee coming down a slope. He said it was nothing, but we were both too soaked and cold to joke around. We hiked in silence, heads low, trying to keep moving. The storm hadn't shown up in any forecasts before we left. When the cabin finally appeared through the mist, it felt like we'd stumbled on salvation. It was smaller than the last ranger shelter we'd stopped at, but had a full roof and 3 wooden walls. Smoke from a nearby fire pit suggested someone had beat us there. As we got closer, we saw a man, broad-shouldered, beard streaked with gray, waving from near the fire. "Come warm up," he called. "I'm Jonah, and that's Rhea inside." Rhea was seated inside on the raised platform, swaddled in a worn navy jacket with the hood pulled up. I introduced Sam and myself, and stepped into the cabin. Rhea stood slowly and extended her hand to Sam, holding it a little longer than felt normal. Her frizzy gray hair was tangled, and her eyes darted around nervously, blinking too often. "So glad you're here," she murmured. "We don't get much company." Jonah added more wood to the fire behind us, and said it was their 25th anniversary hike. Rain or shine, we dropped our soak packs near the fire. Most of the platform was already covered with their gear, but Rhea hurried to clear space for us, right beside her. "Come closer," she urged. Too cold to be shy. I sat between them while Sam quietly squeezed next to me. Rhea immediately launched into a rambling story about how she and Jonah met on a cruise, then quickly corrected herself, saying it was a college hiking group. She laughed too loudly at her own jokes, and kept brushing Sam's arm like they were lifelong friends. It was uncomfortable, but we didn't want to be rude. Jonah, meanwhile, sat across from us eating from a pouch of beef stew. "Hope you're okay sharing the place," he said. "Storms bring everyone together." We nodded. Rhea, meanwhile, wouldn't stop staring at Sam, sometimes whispering things just loud enough to hear, like, "Fate is funny, isn't it?" We started boiling water for our own food, and tried to avoid eye contact. Jonah watched us in silence, not angry, just observing. Rhea kept tugging at our gear zippers, muttering things like, "My sister had one just like this," always just before we could respond. When it was time to lay out our sleeping bags, Rhea insisted we stay close. "Nights are brutal up here," she warned. "You'll want the body heat." We couldn't pitch our tent. Everything was soaked. So we stayed, placing our bags at the far end of the platform, while Jonah and Rhea settled on the opposite side. Rhea sat cross-legged, rocking slowly, eyes on Sam. Night came quick, and so did the tension. Around midnight, I heard a whisper, soft and low, followed by slow steps. I stayed still, pretending to be asleep. I felt something brush past my feet. When I peeked through squinted eyes, Rhea was near our packs, holding something I couldn't make out. She stood still for several seconds, then quietly returned to her side. We had planned to leave early. Before dawn, Sam nudged me awake. Let's go. I reached for our gear, but one backpack was gone. Before we could react, Rhea started drinking from a bottle of cheap whiskey she pulled from her sleeping bag. Jonah looked defeated, said nothing. Rhea tried handing a cup to Sam, who declined. Her mood turned quickly. "Oh, you're better than me, huh?" she snapped, then launched into a wild story about how she and Jonah got married in the Bahamas. Minutes later, she claimed it was at a mountain chapel. The details kept changing. Sometimes they had kids, sometimes not. Sam tried changing the topic, but it didn't help. When he asked how long they'd been together, Rhea froze. "Why?" she snapped. "Think it's weird? Judging us?" She then launched into a bizarre rant about real relationships, tossing around crude details. I stood to check gear, anything to create space. Jonah tried to calm her. "Maybe time to rest," he said gently. "You always silence me," she screamed, hurling her cup against the wall. Then just like that, she went quiet, humming to herself while peeling at her nails, eyes fixed on Sam like a hawk. It hit me, this wasn't just odd behavior. This woman was unstable. We were stuck with no cell service, no light, and no safe way out. I hoped she'd pass out soon. Instead, around 2 a.m., I woke to the sound of sobbing. Rhea sat upright, crying, then yelling, "You drugged me, Jonah. I know what you're doing. You want me gone." Jonah stayed silent. She turned to us suddenly. "You're helping him. I've seen you before." Sam gripped my arm. She stared for a full hour without blinking. I didn't know if she was about to leap at us or fall asleep. Then came the clicking, tongue against teeth. Then low muttering we couldn't make out. I whispered to Sam, "We're leaving." He nodded. We moved carefully, gathered our things as quietly as possible. Rhea never blinked, just watched. We stepped into the rain and hiked fast, veering off trail after about 20 minutes to find a flat spot for the tent. Soaked and shivering, we still felt safer in the middle of nowhere than in that cabin. By sunrise, the rain eased. We packed up and got back on the trail. Around midday, we passed the cabin again. It was empty. Trash everywhere, bottles, wrappers, even our missing pack, ripped open and abandoned. Later, we crossed paths with a group of hikers heading the other way. I warned them about Jonah and Rhea. One guy furrowed his brow. "Yeah, we met them last year." She accused one of us of being part of a government conspiracy. He said trail rangers had received several reports about the same couple, but couldn't act unless something serious happened. Jonah never filed anything, just came back year after year with her in tow. We never saw them again, but I often wonder what might have happened if we'd stayed just one more night. The wild isn't always wild because of nature. Sometimes it's the people you meet inside four walls. Back when I was in high school in 2012, I lived in a quiet mountain village near the Blue Ridge Parkway. It was one of those places where time seemed to crawl, and everyone knew your last name. My father worked at a lumberyard out by the western slope, and the plan was for me to join him after I graduated. It wasn't a dream, but in a place like that, dreams came second to stability. We weren't poor, just stuck. Our house sat close to a thick patch of forest, so close you could hear owls at night and sometimes the eerie howls of distant wildlife. We rarely locked our doors. There wasn't much need to. That's just how safe it felt. But my senior year changed something in me. I developed terrible insomnia. I'd lie awake listening to the ticking fridge or the occasional car crunching on the distant gravel roads. My mom tried everything, teas, taking my gadgets, even eucalyptus rubs. Nothing helped. Then one night in April, I finally drifted off around 3 a.m. I had a dream that still haunts me. I was in the school's old gym changing room, and a girl stood crying by the mirrors. Her hair was long and black, and she wore a damp, pale dress. When she turned to face me, she had no eyes, just hollow, blank sockets. I woke up gasping. My room was pitch dark. The lamp had burned out. My clothes hanging over a chair looked like someone sitting and watching me. I didn't move until I turned on my flashlight, just clothes. I laughed, but I was shaking. I kept that dream to myself, chalked it up to stress. After graduation, I got that job at the yard. The work was loud, heavy, and constant, but it didn't help the sleep. If anything, the visions grew. I'd catch shadows shifting behind me, swear someone passed the hall while I was watching TV. Lights flickering, doors creaking without a draft. Little things, but enough to keep me on edge. 2 years later, I moved in with my girlfriend, Kelsey. She worked nights at the local cafe. Her apartment was small, just enough space for us. I thought being around her would make me feel safer, calmer. And it did for a bit, but then the shadowy figures returned. Some nights I'd wake up and be sure there was someone standing at the foot of the bed. Once, I saw a figure by the dresser, silent still. I blinked and it vanished. Kelsey caught on. She'd find me sleeping on the couch with the TV on, or standing in the hallway staring at the front door. She started keeping a flashlight nearby. Said maybe I was sleepwalking. But I wasn't. I never had. One night she came home after a long shift, and I remember hearing her keys and the bathroom sink running. But when I walked down the hall, the bathroom was empty. The water still running. The door still chained. A minute later, the front door opened and in walked Kelsey, holding dinner and asking, "Why is the bathroom light on?" I didn't answer. In 2019, we got married. Nothing fancy, just a quiet ceremony and dinner with her parents. I barely made it through the night. I was averaging 3 hours of sleep if I was lucky. I started avoiding the wooded trails near our old house. Took longer routes through town just to avoid the silence. On one drive near an old mining road, I saw her again, the woman from the dream. Same pale dress, long hair, walking barefoot by the roadside. It happened again, and again. Sometimes she'd be closer, other times tucked between the trees. Always watching, always there. It wasn't just at night anymore. I'd see flickers of her in rearview mirrors during broad daylight. Once I even thought she stepped in front of my car. I nearly swerved into a ditch. I stopped telling Kelsey. I didn't want her thinking I was losing it, but the fear followed me into every corner of life. I'd pull over to calm down, come into work late, and lie about construction. She finally begged me to see someone. I said I would. I didn't. I was scared they'd drug me, lock me away. Then in January 2023, it peaked. I was driving home after a late shift. Snow coated the roads. The only way back was a narrow bridge by the national park entrance. Old and sketchy, even in daylight. As I crossed it, I saw her, dead center, standing still. I slammed the brakes. My headlights lit her up, unmoving. I didn't honk. I didn't breathe. Then from the other side, a truck blared toward us. As it thundered past, my headlights jolted, and she vanished. In her place, just a tipped trash barrel knocked by the wind. My mind had turned a barrel into her. Or maybe she was never there. I sat frozen, then drove home slow and silent. I didn't tell Kelsey. Not because I didn't trust her, but because I didn't trust myself. A month later, I found myself in the kitchen at 3 a.m., hand on the knife drawer. No memory of how I got there. That's when I saw a doctor, Dr. Lorna Patel, at the County Wellness Center. I told her everything, the dream, the shadows, the figure by the road. She said I wasn't crazy, just exhausted. My brain, starved for rest, was filling in the gaps. She called it chronic anxiety and sleep deprivation hallucinations. She gave me medication and booked therapy sessions. Told me to take time off work and recover. Kelsey helped rearrange the apartment, brighter bulbs, blackout curtains where needed. She sleeps beside me through the rough nights. We're planning to move closer into town, somewhere with lights, somewhere less lonely. I still avoid the bridge. I still see things sometimes, but I'm getting help. And if you're reading this and you live far out where it's too quiet, where the nights are too long, don't wait. Talk to someone, before your mind starts turning shadows into ghosts. The weirdest thing about it was how normal everything seemed at first. Just 5 teens, trying to squeeze the last drop of summer before classes started again. My friend Nolan had been planning this trip for a while, ever since hearing stories from his cousin, who'd done a few hikes through sections of the Adirondack Mountains. We weren't deep in the wilderness, just a public camping area near Pine Bridge Forest. It had a gravel parking loop, designated fire spots, and plenty of space for tents. You could still hear the occasional car on a nearby road, so it didn't feel completely isolated. There were 5 of us: Nolan, me, Josh, Brandon, and Leo. We brought cheap tents and folding chairs, gear mostly bought on sale or borrowed from our older siblings. It was late August, hot during the day, cool once the sun dipped behind the pines. By 6:30 that Friday night, we had our little base camp set up. I still remember how the sunset turned Nolan's tent orange. Dinner was fire-roasted hot dogs and some barely edible boxed mac Josh insisted on making. We joked about senior year, which teachers were jerks, and where we might go for college. It was peaceful. The air smelled like wood smoke and pine needles. By 11, we were all in our tents. I shared one with Leo, and I crashed fast. Normally I toss and turn in sleeping bags, but that night I was out cold. The next morning, we woke around 8:30. Scrambled eggs and instant coffee fueled us while Nolan spread out a laminated map of nearby trails. One short loop caught our attention, just under 2 miles out and back, leading to a waterfall called Birch Drop. It was marked well, relatively flat, and sounded like a solid pre-lunch walk. I got impatient waiting for everyone to pack up, so I told Nolan I'd go ahead and meet them there. He checked his watch. "It's 10:45. Be back by noon," he said. I nodded, checked my own watch, same time, and set out. The trail started just past the parking area. Wide, well-trodden, lined with ferns. I passed 2 hikers coming the opposite way a few minutes in. After that, the trees thickened, and the light dimmed under the canopy. Everything was quiet. No music, no earbuds, just birds and rustling leaves. I stopped to take a picture of a strange yellow mushroom growing out of a stump. Then about halfway to the falls, I noticed something odd: total silence. No wind, no distant voices, no cars. I checked my watch, 11:15. Almost there. That's when I saw a faint side path to the right. It wasn't marked, but had clearly been walked on before. I stepped about 10 feet down it. There were some crushed beer cans and a burned-out campfire ring. Nothing recent. I turned to head back, and froze. Behind me, maybe 30 feet into the trees, someone stood. Just standing. Still. They wore a dark jacket with the hood up, one hand by their side, the other gripping something long, maybe a stick. They weren't hiding, but also weren't moving. Just watching. I raised my hand. "Trail's that way," I said, forcing a casual tone. No reply. My stomach tightened. I backed away slowly, made it back to the main trail, then walked fast, resisting the urge to run. I didn't hear footsteps, didn't look back. Eventually, I saw a wooden sign, Falls, 0.4 miles. I relaxed a little and followed it. Birch Drop was smaller than I expected, maybe a 10-foot cascade into a rocky pool. Still, it was beautiful. I took some pictures, soaked in the sound of water and wind, then turned around. The hike back felt identical. Same curves, same muddy patches, even my own boot prints. I reached camp feeling calm, even energized. As I stepped into the clearing, Nolan and Josh ran up, faces pale. "Where the hell have you been?" Nolan yelled. "We were about to call search and rescue." I blinked. I went to the waterfall. I got back early. He shoved his phone in my face. 1:55 p.m. My watch matched. I stared at it. "No." I left at 10:45. I was back by 12:10 at the latest. They all looked shaken. Josh said they'd been yelling for me along the trail. Nolan thought he'd heard something once, but nothing clear. I showed them the photos I'd taken, time-stamped at 11:30. After that, nothing. No photos, no texts. Just blank. I felt fine. No dizziness, no confusion. I remembered every step. We packed up in silence. The car ride back felt long. Nolan didn't even play music. At home, I told my parents it was a great trip. Left out the time gap. Spent that night looking up everything, missing time, trail anomalies, even memory blackouts. Nothing made sense. I've returned to Pinebridge Forest since. Nothing weird ever happened again, but now I double-check my watch constantly. I never hike alone, and I still think about that figure off the path. Still wonder how 3 hours vanished without a trace. Last November, I went out to Hawk Pine Bluff, a ridge near my hometown in Oregon, to photograph the last wave of autumn leaves. I'd been there dozens of times over the years. It's only a 10-minute drive from my place, and the views are stunning in fall. I left right after sunrise with my camera bag, some trail snacks, extra batteries, and my Nikon DSLR with a long lens I love for wide shots. The air was chilly, somewhere in the mid-40s, and I had my fleece, hiking boots, and gloves on. The trail cuts through a forest mostly made of maples and birches, and in late fall, the canopy glows in oranges and reds. I'd marked a few great photo spots on my GPS from past visits, cliffside clearings and breaks in the trees where you can see the entire valley below. I planned to stop at a few of those, take my time, maybe eat something near the peak, and head back before dusk. About 1.5 miles in, the trail splits. I took the left fork, which climbs steeper but cuts through denser trees. That stretch is usually quiet, almost eerily so, and perfect for capturing the contrast of dark trunks against the colored leaves. As I walked slowly, scanning for shots, I noticed something moving off to my right, deep in the undergrowth. I thought it might be a coyote or maybe a hiker cutting their own path, but then I spotted a person, about 75 yards away. They wore a dull green hoodie with the hood up and dark pants, barely visible among the trees. Their movement was cautious and slow, as if they were trying not to be seen. That immediately felt strange. Hikers usually wear bright colors and make noise to avoid startling animals. This person looked like they were intentionally staying hidden. I raised my camera to zoom in, hoping to get a better look, but the person stayed mostly in shadow. They weren't walking on any trail, just weaving through the forest. Then I realized they were stopping behind trees, scanning ahead before moving, like they were tracking or being tracked. I kept low and watched from behind a boulder, unsure if I should call out or leave. But then I saw something else. Another person was standing farther up the slope, facing the first one. This second figure had on a brown coat and jeans, holding something long, maybe a walking stick or a tool of some kind. They weren't hiding like the first one. They just stood there watching. The whole thing gave me a bad feeling. I was just about to back away when the first person stood and approached the second. They moved with strange confidence, not fast but deliberate. Just as they were about to meet, both turned their heads suddenly and stared down the slope, right toward where I was crouched. I froze. I hadn't made a sound, but it felt like they sensed me. I ducked behind a log and held my breath. I heard light steps moving away through the woods, then silence. When I looked again, they were gone. No sign of either. I slowly made my way back to the main trail, shaken. I decided to continue, but with way more caution. Every few minutes I'd stop, listen, check my surroundings. I wasn't scared exactly, just on edge. Further up the trail, maybe another half-mile in, I veered off when I saw a narrow deer path that seemed to line up with the direction the two figures had come from. I followed it quietly, keeping my camera ready. The terrain got rougher, more roots, more uneven ground. Then, behind a row of large rocks near a trickling stream, I found it. There, hidden beneath some pine roots and behind layers of overlapping tarps, was a rough shelter. It looked lived in. There were rainwater jugs, stacked firewood, a rusty camp stove, and even a patched-up tent frame covered with plastic sheeting. A few metal cans sat next to a dented pot. The smell of burnt wood lingered. I touched the ashes in the pit, still warm. This wasn't a day camp. Someone was living here long-term. I saw damp clothes hanging from a line strung between trees and old newspapers stuffed in a crate. It felt like someone had built a life out here. I snapped a few photos just in case, and that's when I heard it, sticks cracking behind me. I turned and saw a man at the edge of the clearing. Mid-50s maybe, with a thick beard and tired eyes. He wore several layers of ragged clothes and stood still, like he wasn't sure I was real. Then he started shaking his head and backing away, mumbling quickly under his breath. I raised my hands and said I didn't mean any harm, but as I stepped toward him, he yelled, sharp and afraid, and ran into the woods like a spooked deer. I called after him, but he didn't stop, just vanished into the trees. I waited a while, hoping he'd return, but eventually I left. Back in town, I went to the community outreach center. I knew someone there from a photo exhibit I'd done the previous spring. I explained everything, where I'd been, what I saw, the man's appearance, the shelter. They listened closely and said they'd look into it. A week later, I returned to the spot. I don't know what I expected, maybe a sign he was still okay. But the shelter was gone. Everything. No tarps, no stove, no crates, not even footprints. Just pine needles and damp leaves. It was like no one had ever been there. When I checked back with the outreach worker, she said their contact couldn't find any trace either. Nothing. Sometimes I wonder if that man was a hermit or someone on the run, or maybe just someone who wanted to be forgotten. But now, whenever I hike, I find myself watching the tree line more than the trail. Not for deer or birds, but for people who don't want to be seen. I started volunteering for search and rescue in the Granite Loop region of the Timbershade National Preserve about 3 years back. It was one of those roles where I could be outdoors and actually contribute to something meaningful. I'd earned my backcountry first aid certification during college, mostly because I hiked every weekend anyway, so SAR work just made sense. Our squad had 12 trained volunteers who backed up the rangers during alerts. Most call-outs were routine, late campers, rolled ankles, or someone confusing one trail loop for another. Stuff that usually ended with a relieved chuckle and a bottle of water. We carried typical SAR kits, radios, GPS units, basic first aid, and laminated elevation maps. I had this little checklist I kept clipped to my pack, a personal habit. It felt reassuring, methodical. Even the nasty weather searches didn't rattle me anymore. I knew those trails better than I knew my apartment layout. My regular partner was Layla. She joined the crew about a year after me. Quiet, no nonsense, the type who only spoke when it mattered, which made her perfect for the job. Most of our missions were uneventful. But one Thursday in early October changed that. We got a call just after 9 a.m. A man named Mark Ellison, 42, had gone missing. His wife had reported him overdue the night before. Not like him, she said. Mark was ex-fire service, now a building inspector. He told her he planned a 10-mile run through one of the known loops and would be home by dinner time. Clear skies that day. No wind. No storms. The kind of day you dream of for trail running. His truck was still parked near Trail Point Echo. Doors locked, windows up, his phone left on the seat. Rangers had already checked shelters and first aid boxes. Drones didn't help much. The tree canopy was thick. Our team was split into pairs. Layla and I got assigned to the southeast leg of the loop, the final stretch if he'd followed his planned path. We parked at an old service access road around 10:30, hiked to the trailhead, and started our search. Layla logged coordinates and carried the GPS while I flagged trees with reflective tape every quarter mile. That section ran through tight pine groves, then opened into a rocky bluff. We moved slow, calling Mark's name and watching for any signs, snapped twigs, dropped items, anything. At about 11:45, we checked out an old ranger overlook that hadn't been maintained in years. Nothing there but a burned-out fire ring and wind. Layla scoped the clearing while I wandered east. I spotted a partial boot print near some lichen-covered boulders. Not clear enough to ID, but odd. Could have been his. We marked it and moved on. Around 12:20, the trail narrowed against a drop-off. Left was a slope, right was a 60-foot descent into a gully. Layla paused, eyed the slope. "Should we check below?" she asked. I looked, No broken limbs or signs of a slide. No signs of a fall, I said. We kept moving. A few minutes later, we spotted something. A red microfiber cap tangled in low branches, like it had been caught rather than placed. No dirt, no blood. Just out of place. We logged it, flagged the spot, and kept going. By just after 1 p.m., we crossed a footpath not on any of our maps. Narrow, unmarked, but boot prints suggested someone had used it recently. Layla raised an eyebrow. Not part of the loop. I nodded. Quick sweep. 15 minutes out, then back. That unmarked path curved through dense forest and opened suddenly into a clearing, circular, maybe 40 feet across, dead quiet. Not peaceful. Still. Air felt heavy. At the far end was a stacked formation of rocks, waist high. Sloppy but deliberate. Layla checked it out. I spotted something shiny under a fallen tree branch. Keys. Car key, house key, a gym fob on a bright red ring. I radioed base. Mark's wife had described the exact carabiner. Match confirmed. We did a grid search of the clearing. Near the rock stack, I found a piece of yellow fabric, looked torn off a rain shell. No dirt, no blood, just shredded like it snagged on something. Layla knelt down. Time to call this in, she said. We agreed to stay put for reinforcements, but kept looking. Almost 2 miles deeper into unmarked woods, we found a full water bottle placed neatly on a flat stone beside a stream. Clean. Upright. Like it had been set there intentionally. No trails led to that stream. Just a pattern of broken branches and disturbed grass. This looks more like someone dragged him than he walked here, Layla whispered. A minute later, we spotted more signs. A sock on a branch. Then a hiking pole wedged between saplings, bent at a weird angle. This was placed, I said. It felt like we were being shown a path. Then came the smell, chemical, sharp, not natural. Layla smelled it too. We radioed our location and requested backup. The ranger responded, but also told us other SAR teams had reported strange things recently. Rock formations and symbols, odd static over comms, fragments of weird conversations. Layla was writing down timestamps when we heard it, a voice. Weak, distant, but unmistakable. Help. We moved fast, weaving through low branches and narrowing woods. Finally, we found him, Mark, tied to a thick cedar tree. Climbing rope around his chest and arms, legs half free, lips dry and cracked. Please, he whispered. We checked him. Dehydrated but alive. He muttered. He said I had to learn. Said I disrespected the forest. Layla asked, who? Guy in camo, Mark said. Said someone fell up ahead. Lured me off trail. Then tied me up. Talked about justice. Said I needed to pay. I was cutting the rope when we heard movement in the trees. Controlled, deliberate. Not wildlife. Layla radioed. Potential hostile nearby. Request immediate response. We supported Mark, gave him water, checked his vitals. The presence was still out there. We couldn't see him, but we could feel it. He said nobody would come, Mark mumbled. That the woods were his now. We made our way back. Mark between us. Quick, silent, alert. Backup met us at the trailhead. At 2:50 p.m. medics took over. Other SAR teams swept the area into the night. The next morning, they found a camouflaged shelter under a rock ridge. Tarps, burner stove, water jugs, and pages of handwritten notes. Dozens of entries on hikers, descriptions, license plates, gear checklists. One page listed Mark in full detail. Another note said, lesson in progress. Observe return. They had been watching people for weeks. Mark helped ID the man in an old database. Known to law enforcement. Aggressive trespass complaints. Always vanished before arrest. He was never found. Mark moved to Colorado 6 months later. New life, new job. Doesn't hike alone anymore. As for me, I still do SAR, but I carry a blade now, and I never ignore a bent branch or a misplaced sock. People worry about bears, snakes, and weather, but those aren't the worst dangers out here. It's the ones who think the woods belong to them, and no one else. That was today's scary stories. Tell me in the comments, what part scared you the most? Got your own creepy story? Share it below. I might use it in a future video. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell. It really helps the channel. Thanks for watching Dreadful Nightmares. See you in the next one.